Welcome. Welcome to the 2024 Windsor constituency general election hustings, which is formally being organised by the Old Court in partnership with Windsor and Eton Brewery. And this kind of repeats an event that we did exactly like this 5 years ago in 2019, for many of you that might have been here. So first of all, I'd just like to thank the candidates for giving their time up to be here and all of you for attending tonight. I need to make two introductions, first of all, which is the two people that most made this event happen. And they are Martin Denny, who's standing on gate duty, who has responsibility for the Old Court, and Jen McGeechee, who organised this event 5 years ago and has put so much effort into doing it tonight. All the organising, liaising with candidates is all down to Jen. Three quick housekeeping points next. The first thing is that we're live streaming this tonight, both for recording and to show at other venues in town. And so the key rules are no flash photography and no filming. Is that okay? No flash photography and no filming. Escape routes are quite simple. There's no drills planned tonight. There are three main escape routes out of this auditorium. The main one is the door that almost all of you came in by, through that into the lobby and out the main front. Secondly, there's a nice big fire exit through here that goes straight out to the car park. And for those of you further up, if you exit via the top door, then there's two fire escapes, one down into St Mark's Road and one down into the car park. It'll be clear routes for going down from there. And for toilets, you may know the main toilets here are both downstairs. We have a disabled toilet, which is just off the lobby, key for which we've got on the box office. Everybody needs that. So look, finally, before I hand over to the moderator, if I just introduce the two other key people who are running the event tonight. First and foremost, Jamie Rose, who has been Jamie has been a Windsor resident for about 7 years now, works as a business systems analyst, interested in politics, interested in acting, interested in rugby, a big Harlequins fan, I understand. That's not a political issue to say that. And Jodie Grove, Jodie is going to be our roving mic tonight, and Jodie is, since last year, has been a councillor for Datchet, Horton, Wraysbury, as a borough councillor in RBWM, as an independent candidate, and is independent in everything she's done there. So those are the two key people who are going to be running the event tonight. So Jamie, can I hand over to you? Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you for the introduction, Will. I'll start by welcoming all of yourselves and our prospective parliamentary candidates to our hustings for the new Windsor constituency. Not only do we have yourselves present, but here at the Old Court, we are also live streaming via YouTube. We do ask no filming and no flash photography, please. The stream will be made available after the event. As Will said, my name is Jamie, and I'm going to be your host and moderator for this evening. I've been a resident here in Windsor since 2017, having moved here with my partner of 13 years. It was an honour to be asked to host and moderate these hustings. I will admit this is the first time that I've done this, so please be patient with me. I think you'll agree with me, this general election is an exciting opportunity for the constituents of Windsor, as we don't have an incumbent standing for re-election. While we don't have an incumbent candidate, an interesting fact that I found out is that this year actually marks the 150th year that one incumbent party has been chosen to represent the people of Windsor. While preparing for this evening, I found out that our constituency, being the Royal Borough, has led to some previous monarchs dabbling in the election process. Of note was the hotly contested general election of 1780, when King George III wished to defeat Admiral Keppel, later Viscount Keppel, who was the incumbent. The King encouraged landowner Penistone Portlock Powney to stand as a contestant to contest the seat by paying him £250 from the King's personal account. That's worth approximately £562,000 today. After this royal interference, Keppel lost by just 16 votes. Historians of record noted, and they suggested that the Windsor electorate were headstrong and difficult to manage. I hope that doesn't prove to be the case this evening. On to our hustings. The format that we have is that the candidates will then each start with opening statements. They will be time-boxed to 4 minutes. When there's 1 minute remaining, a bell will ring, and then this will be followed by a second bell at time. Opening statements will be in alphabetical order by candidate names, not party. We'll then be moving on to the audience Q&A with yourselves, and that will be based around specific topics. We will be taking a 15 minutes break, and then that will be followed by the further Q&A, again around topics. We will then conclude with closing statements from the candidates of 2 minutes each, again in bell, and then we will be doing that in reverse alphabetical order. So the topics that we've chosen, we will open with a question from our local residents and students. Unfortunately, some of the students weren't able to be with us this evening. We ask that all questions are addressed to the panel rather than individuals. We will also endeavour to be taking questions from those watching via YouTube. The topics that we have are education, climate and environment, cost of living, including economy, taxation and business, NHS and social care, and local issues. I hope that we'll be able to give as many of you as possible an opportunity to ask questions and seek answers from our prospective parliamentary candidates. We should remember that we each have our own perspective. Please be respectful of opinions you may not necessarily agree with. Discriminatory language will not be tolerated. All prospective parliamentary candidates were invited to participate this evening. Unfortunately, some were unable to join us, namely Simran Dillon, the Workers' Party of Britain, and Harl Gruhl from Reform UK. Let me introduce our candidates we have with us this evening. Michael Boyle, Green Party. David Buckley, Independent. Pavita Mann, Labour Party. Jack Ranking, Conservative Party. And Julian Tizzy, Liberal Democrats. So, without further ado, let's have our first opening statement of the evening from Michael. Yes, please, yes.
Hello and welcome. So first of all, who am I and why am I standing to become your Green Party MP for Windsor? My name is Michael Edward Boyle and Windsor is my home. It's where I was born in Heatherwood Hospital, Ascot. It's where I went to school, home of First, Dedworth Middle and Windsor Boys, and it's where I spent the best part of my life. I care deeply about the people of Windsor because they are my friends, my neighbours and my family. My route into politics was completely unplanned. It was 2016. I'd recently moved back to Windsor after completing my degree, and I was working in the town centre and walking back home when I stumbled across a man, starfished on his back in the middle of Pescott Street. In his hands, he clutched 2 empty bottles of whiskey. Little did I know in that moment that this would be the start of my political journey. His name was Martin Allen, and over the following months, I would try and help him out by bringing hot soup, clothes, and the occasional cigarette. It was cold and bitter winter, and every time I would go to check on him, sit down beside him, and we would talk, sing, and listen to music together. He loved music, James Taylor, Deep Purple, and the Smiths, and over many months we formed an unlikely friendship as I tried to support him into local services such as the Windsor Homeless Project. That year, Spurred on by him, I decided hot soups weren't enough anymore, and I put my name forward to run as a local council candidate in Windsor. 8 years later, and here I am, running as the MP for Windsor. Sadly, my dear friend Martin passed away 3 years ago, at home with me at his side. But if he was here today, I know he would be sitting here in the front row cheering me on. We need real change, and I'm here to offer you that opportunity. As the Green MP for Windsor, I would seek to represent all residents from Dedworth to Langley, from Wraysbury to Ascot. I want to restore people's hope and faith as a force for good, as politics as a force for good, and I will work cooperatively with all to make the case for a green agenda that promotes quality of life and protects people and planet for the common good. In this current environmental and cost of living crisis, it is obvious that politicians seem completely out of touch with the people they are elected to represent, and the political class obsess over issues that often have little to no bearing on the day-to-day life of the vast majority of the public. Political discourse in Parliament is way behind public opinion on many important issues, such as nationalisation of key public services, such as rail, energy, sewage and water, and the lack of action on these issues is affecting us all. Whether it's flooding and the provision of clean water, raw sewage being pumped into our seas and rivers, crippling energy bills, draining our bank accounts, we need change. And as the Green candidate, I'm here to fight for that change. The Greens are the only party who have the ambition to deliver the bold actions needed to transform our economy and end the cost of living crisis, to restore our NHS and protect our environment for generations to come. The constituency of Windsor has given me so much, and I want to repay this constituency by giving us someone that represents them in Parliament that they can be proud of. A local lad who will put people first and will fight for them in Parliament to deliver real hope and real change. Vote for me, Michael Edward Boyle, on July 4th. Thank you.
So, David, please. Thank you.
Good evening. I am David Buckley. I am your independent candidate for all of the Windsor constituency. We have all evidence the political parties fail us in the past and today. But what about tomorrow? Can you imagine a life where Parliament puts your needs first? This is possible if we set party politics aside. We need to unite, using common sense to dictate what we need and what we need now. No single party can solve the big issues we face. Let's make a start. We all need to unite. Let's use this opportunity together as a catalyst for change. Let me be your representative in Parliament. Do not wait until it is too late. Start today by putting an independent into Parliament. This election is a binary choice. Vote for any political party and get more of the same, or vote for an independent who will put your needs first. Vote in the same way, expecting a different result, does not work. A vote for any political party is a vote for more broken promises. We need real change, and all of Windsor is that beacon for change. If the Royal constituency votes to put an independent into Parliament for the first time, it will change politics forever, right now. It will create a more prosperous future for us all. This is the first step for real change. All political parties follow their own agendas, not yours. This means they cannot put constituents first. Only an independent can. An independent answers to you, the constituents. I am a local resident putting your needs first. With me, you will never be alone. I will stand side by side with you, fighting for your aspirations. and restoring trust in Parliament. And now all of Windsor is called to action to reset democracy for a brighter future. Thank you.
Hi everyone. Wasn't expecting that clap right at the start before you heard what I got to say. I'm delighted to be here today, and I actually just want to start by thanking the Old Court and the organisers for putting this on together. I'm sure it's not an easy task, so thank you so much. I'd also like to thank all of you for coming out today to hear us as candidates put a face to us, our name, rather than just seeing our faces on the leaflets that you get through the door, to test us with your questions, see how we react, and ultimately make your decision on who you think is best placed to represent you in Parliament. My name's Pav, and I am delighted to be the Labour Party candidate here. I'm also delighted that we are having the general election now, but we mustn't forget why we're having it now. Rishi Sunak is a weak PM. He didn't have faith in his plan to deliver improvements to the country, and yet he's now turning to the British public and still asking you to have faith in him. This country is crying out for change. Now, we know we live in a wonderful country. We know that Windsor is a great constituency, but we have been badly let down by the Conservatives. The Conservative Party has left this country in a worse off state than when they took office in 2010. Living standards are down. Crime goes unpunished. Ambulances don't come. Our schools are literally crumbling over the heads of our children, and we see sewage being pumped out in our waterways day in and day out. And what have they done to fix this problem? Absolutely nothing. Instead of focusing on our priorities and doing the work that it entails to fix these issues, they instead exasperate the situation by focusing on their internal division and their internal fighting at the expense of serving the British public. And they are getting desperate. We've just seen their manifesto launch in where they promised £71 billion of unfunded spending commitments. It doesn't appear that they have learnt the lessons from Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget. And it is people like me and people like you that are left paying the price and picking up the bill when those things go wrong. If the Tories get 5 more years, nothing will change. Now, there is a clear choice at this election. More chaos and carnage with the Conservatives, more decline and division with the Conservatives, or more illegal parties and Prosecco drinking with the Conservatives. Or we can turn the page and have stability, hope and unity with a changed Labour Party with a serious plan to change our country. We can stop the chaos, we can turn the page, and we can look forward with ambition and a desire to rebuild our country once again. Now, I am going to come to the local situation, because the Conservative Party have let down this country, but they have also let you down here locally. There has been a level of complacency here that frankly beggars belief. We've had an MP for the last 19 years, and you don't need me to tell you this, but who has been absent, has not delivered anything for Windsor residents. As a result of the Tory mismanagement of our economy, the average mortgage in this constituency has gone up by £450 a month. Your average weekly food shop has gone up by £150 a week. And yet, you are paying, on average, £870 more in taxes a year, as this Tory party presides over the largest tax burden in 70 years. This is unsustainable, and it cannot go on. Now, Windsor deserves better than this. Now, I'm proud to be standing as a Labour Party candidate, but I'm also proud to be standing on my own qualities and my own principles. I am tenacious, and I will always fight for you and your priorities. If elected, I promise to be an active, a visible, and an accessible MP, something that hasn't been taking place here in Windsor for a long time. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Jack Rankin, and I'm standing to be your Conservative and Unionist Member of Parliament for all the beautiful towns and villages of the Windsor constituency. I've enjoyed meeting many of you in the community and on the doorsteps over the last few months, thank you for everybody who's engaged and talked to me so far. What you've told me is that what you want to see locally is a local, vocal constituency MP, first and foremost, who is available and accessible in every single town and village of this constituency. If you trust me with your vote, that is the kind of MP which I want to be. I live in the constituency, my children will go to schools in the constituency, I will commute to Parliament on a daily basis like so many residents do locally. I will open an office in Windsor High Street and I'll have surgeries in each and every one of the very different communities that make up this constituency. In terms of what you've been telling me on the doorstep for local issues, I'm trying to fight an hour plan based on those. The first is very much flooding. The people, particularly in Datchet, Horton, Wraysbury, Old Windsor and Colnbrook, have been let down locally and nationally, and my first priority is going to be fighting for national funding for the Channel 1 of the River Thames scheme. I believe that that is critical national infrastructure, and it's unreasonable that we should be asking a local authority to pick up that bill. For me, that's something that I should be fighting on your behalf in Westminster. The second is Heathrow, being no doubt that the third runway is coming back in some way, shape or form. Whatever the Conservative Party whip is when that comes back to Parliament, I will be voting against on behalf of this community, and I'll also be fighting for more protection over noise respite and more equitable distribution of flight paths. The third thing that I would highlight at this time is policing. Since the last general election, we committed to put 20,000 extra police officers on the street. That's been delivered, and we've now got more police in the Thames Valley and in Surrey Police than ever before. In the manifesto, we've committed to deliver 8,000 more, and what I want to see is those deployed in our communities, particularly our villages, on issues that are most important to people locally. And people tell me that's car theft, burglary, and antisocial behaviour, the kind of things that really erode quality of life. Now, I understand the frustrations with the Conservatives nationally, because I often share some of them. And we've all seen the polls and heard the commentators. And I think it looks likely that Labour will win a substantial majority nationally. But I think we should be very careful about that. I think we should be careful about giving Keir Starmer a blank cheque when he still really hasn't told us what he will do with it or how much it will cost you. And my job, if you trust me with your support, is to be first and foremost that local, vocal, accessible constituency member of Parliament, but it's also to be part of the team which rebuilds the Conservative Party in opposition, whilst holding Keir Starmer, incoming Labour government, to account on your behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Julian, thank you.
Hello, thank you. So what was that? Who knows? Right, so let me just talk, first of all, about what drives me. I just thought that's where I wanted to start, about me. I have always fought injustice, and it's my passion. This is what my passion is. And this is a multi-headed thing, injustice. It's locally, as a local champion, as it were, nationally, and internationally as well. I think it's a travesty, for example, that in the 21st century, we have people in this country who just can't make ends meet with the cost of living crisis because inflation has gone up, but unfortunately their wages haven't gone up, or maybe they don't earn at the moment. I think it's really sad that there are some people who can't get a dentist, an ambulance, for example, or a GP. I think it's disgusting that in this country now we have sewage being poured into the Thames right up here. And what do the Environment Agency and Ofwat do? Nothing really, because they're toothless. That's the country we have now. I think it's also disgusting and really sad that internationally we have a government that has trashed our rule of law, trashed the rule of law, ruined our reputation in this country. I think it's sad that the world is now a very dangerous place. We have, on Gaza, for example, we have both the Conservatives and, sadly, the Labour Party as well, really being very, very weak in their response to what is clearly something where both sides have clearly committed some atrocities. And I think that what we need is international law, we need international alliances. We've damaged our relationship with our best ally of the lot, the EU. And that's cost us, it's the cost of living crisis, it's also ruined our reputation. Now, I'm a pragmatist, and I believe that we need a competent government. And I really do not like the fact that we've had a government that instead of policies has stoked pointless culture wars. It's been gimmicks, not policies. For example, Rwanda. I mean, goodness me, if there's one policy that epitomises everything that's wrong with this government, it's Rwanda. Doesn't work, it's costly, and it's wrong, and it's illegal under international law. I'm also a campaigner. You know me because I've been in this community for a long time. I've fought multiple campaigns. Now, I'm the only one of the candidates, really, who can genuinely say that they are a long-term local campaigner for this area. I'm the only one. And a little bit about me. So I grew up in Essex. My dad sharpened knives. I helped him sometimes. I then eventually went to a nice school, became an accountant. As an accountant, I'm now helping, as a councillor here locally, fix the mess that was left back behind by the Conservatives in the Royal Borough, a bit like the way the mess that was left in Slough by the Labour Party. I'm collaborative as well. I have always had family and friends with lots of different views, and I've learnt to respect them. I've learnt to respect different views. And if you elect me, I will try to listen to you. Thank you.
Right, thank you, candidates. We'll now move on to our first topic of the evening, which is education. Jodie, do you have our first question, please?
I sure do, thank you. So the first question comes in from a resident, and the question is, with the current teacher shortage and the escalating cost of living crisis, what would you do as an MP to ensure attraction and retention of great teachers and educators for our state schools?
Michael, would you like to start?
I can do, yeah. So we don't pay our teachers enough. They work very hard. My mother was a local teacher in local schools, and we simply don't remunerate them for their hard work. Also, the amount of work that they have to do. Growing up and seeing my mum work every night, marking, especially at the secondary and primary level, there's an unnecessary nature to it, which is why one of the Green Party policies is to reduce the stress on our education system by ending high-stakes formal testing at primary and secondary schools and by abolishing the unfair Ofsteds.
David?
Yes, thank you very much. I think when we look at teachers and the shortage of teachers and a lot of the other agencies and key workers around the country, they all suffer from the same thing. And I think in particular our constituency. Our constituency has an average house price of £700,000 with an average salary of £35,000. It doesn't take a lot to equate, that doesn't work. So for key workers who want to come and work here in our constituency and other places around the country, I believe we should offer other incentives. I'll be looking to put ideas onto the table whereby, for instance, maybe there's a no deposit scheme for the key workers and teachers with zero interest, which obviously a lot of the parties have been keen to do. And I think that these are things that we need to bring in and find immediate solutions to the problems to help teachers. Obviously, we have a primary school teacher in our family, and we hear of the stories of families where they're struggling really to teach their children and to manage the situation. The first year they go into school, most of the teachers are spending most of their time teaching the children about toilet training. And that shouldn't be what a teacher does. This should be taught at home, and then the teacher's left to teach. So I think there's two things. I think there's overwork, the wrong type of work, but most important, I think the most important thing that I would like to see is I would like to see incentives for all key workers whereby they can afford a safe and secure home over their head and work where they want to work. At the moment, they cannot. So we've got to be creative and visionary with our approach to that to get immediate input and help to those people to get them to come and work in our constituency.
Thank you. Pav.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to thank the questioner who submitted that question because they have actually hit the nail on the head there because we are facing, after 14 years of this government, a real workforce crisis in our schools, and that is the issue that a lot of our state schools are facing. We've seen teacher vacancies are at a record high. We have the number of experienced staff that are leaving the education system as a result. And what this means is that our children are facing shortage of teachers in core subjects, but importantly, it means they're facing also a continual churn of supply teachers, so they're never having the stability and the consistency that they need in those subjects. So what are we going to do about it? So this is a really core part of the Labour Party manifesto. It's actually one of the first steps that Keir Starmer set out. Firstly, recruit 6,500 additional teachers, specifically in those core subjects like maths and English, to make sure we are not continuing the system where unqualified teachers in those subjects are teaching our children. And that is really, really important. We need to make sure that actually it is appropriate teachers in those subjects who are focusing on teaching children. Then there's some of the wider issues that some of my colleagues have actually touched on. It is a very high-stress job that teachers face, and part of the way of the current Ofsted system of rating isn't fit for purpose. We've unfortunately heard numerous cases of actually the real-life impact that this can have on our teachers. So we are also proposing to change the current Ofsted rating in a way that is clearer for parents, but fairer for those who work in the staff.
Alleviating, then, the pressure that are on teachers?
Part of it, that's not the only thing. So the other aspect of what is in the Labour Party proposals as well is ensuring that teachers, once they enter the workforce, that they do have continual professional development. Because actually, once you become a teacher, that's not when you stop learning either. So making sure that access to that continued training and the support for staff who move into newly qualified roles, new leadership roles such as head teachers or assistant heads, that support package is there for them in terms of training and mentorship. And finally,
Thank you. Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
And
finally, I was just going to say, underpinning all of this, because my colleagues has rightly touched on the issue of salaries and the issue of housing costs, underpinning all of this is a need to deliver stable economic growth. And the Labour Party is committed on making that the number one outcome that is underpinning everything that we will do. And we do also have a proposal for a deposit.
Thank you. We will be coming on to housing,
Okay.
so I think that's probably a subject which we can tackle later on. Jack, thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. I think it goes without question that one of every government's top priorities should be to ensure that every child gets to realise its full potential, and education is an absolute key part of that. I think, in fairness to the Conservatives, we've got a good record in education. We've increased spending.
Had a reaction there. Would you like to respond to that then?
No, I think it's political activists, so that's fine. We've increased spending to 60 billion, which is higher than it's ever been before, and we've got our schools from 68% good or outstanding in the country to 89%. Now, a lot of that is down to our reforms, which has been increasing rigour within our education. So for mathematics, for example, we've gone from 27th to 11th in England in the world, and in reading, we're now considered the best in the West in terms of primary reading. The question very specifically was about teacher retention. Pav's talked about pay, and she's talked about increasing teachers. I think we have to be very careful about unfunded commitments. I think when I'm talking to teachers on the doorstep, what they talk to me is about workload. And I think in terms of bringing in that rigour into our education system, we have created, I think, an over-officious Ofsted kind of regime. I think we need to look about what is paperwork for paperwork's sake, so teachers can spend more time doing what's valuable for our children and less what is needed for the, to tick the right boxes. I would also join David in the affordable housing criteria. I think it's very important that we, in expanding our housing stock locally...
We will come on to housing, so I would like to pick that up later. Thank you. So,
specific statement
Yep,
that was made in
that's
that
what
around
we're here for.
unfunded spending cuts. Let me be really clear. The cost of everything that I was saying is £260 million. It is not unfunded. If you look at our manifesto, it's very clear where the money is coming from. That particular money is funded from the removing the exemption from VAT on private schools.
Okay.
So the
Right,
allegation
okay,
of it
we'll
being
be coming on to
unfunded is
education,
entirely
so
untrue.
please, right, please, I'll let you come back. Julian, can you pick up on the question?
So just very quickly, first of all, we think that that is not a good idea. What the Liberal Democrats would do is we would look at the charitable status. Some schools already do this. Some private schools already do a lot of good for charity, and it will just make sure that it raises the bar for all of them. But we think that that's a bad idea overall. To answer the question, so look, I'm going to be honest here. Look, I'm married to a teacher. I've got family who are teachers, and look, we know this is an issue, and unfortunately, there are too many good teachers who are leaving the profession at the moment. And as also school governor, it's often about funding for the schools. And what the Liberal Democrats have said is we will increase school funding per pupil above the rate of inflation every year for the next 5 years. Also, and I'm really proud of this because this was a big achievement in the coalition for the Liberal Democrats, we introduced the pupil premium, and we would reverse the cuts that the Conservatives have made to the pupil premium. This is for the people who really, really need help. I really like the fact that we'll have a dedicated mental health professional in every school as well. One more thing I will say, which is just about Ofsted. I think that, look, we need a regime, but it needs to be a watchdog, not a bloodhound. And at the moment, it's this all or nothing. If you fail, you have to change the governance. Well, that's not necessarily the right answer. So there's a lot that needs to be done, but we do need to, I think we need to sort of properly have a more independent school teachers review body on pay, but there's a few other, it's more than just pay.
Thank you. Okay, we will now open up to the audience with our first question. So our subject matter is education.
Are there any educators or teachers in the room who have a question?
I'm going to send you up the back there, Jodie.
This is where I try not to fall up or down the stairs. Make no promises. Where was that hand that was up? Okay, I'm going to come up the back first, and then I'll come back here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jodie. Richard Endicott, local school teacher. One of my students is up for the election. Hello, Michael. It's good to see you. Now, this question is about recruiting and retention of staff. And a lot have been talking about recruiting staff and paying X amount of millions of pounds at getting new staff, new skills, whatever. What about us old goats who have been around for 20 years? Who's looking after us?
Who would like to start? So I think your question there is then actually, again, it is for teacher retention itself, but then your longevity of actual your performance and staying within the actual profession.
Yeah, that's right. So it's about, it's about how that teachers develop skills, develop expertise, particularly in terms of classroom management, behaviour management, knowledge of the curriculum, knowledge of exams, best way forwards. There's been a lot of money over the past, God knows how many years, at recruiting staff who then left the profession within the first 5 years. Whereas those of us who have been around are probably best placed to
So I think that question there is about actually keeping the teachers within the profession.
I'm happy to have a go, Jamie.
Thank you.
Richard, I'd welcome your views, but what teachers have told me on the doorstep is that teaching is a vocation, right? That's what you want to do. That's what it's all about, right? But I think for too many teachers, they feel like they're doing too much, paperwork, stuff that is for Ofsted's benefit, not for children's benefit. So I think, in terms of retention, it's allowing you to spend more time kind of giving your pupils those opportunities that you want to give to them. So that's where I would focus my efforts, and that's based on what I've heard from teachers on the doorstep.
Sorry, what's the... Yeah, go on, sorry,
here.
what's the...
So, for example, Pav suggested that she's going to pay for the extra teachers with the independent school levy. I think that's been thoroughly debunked. If 10 to 15% of pupils are displaced into the state system by this levy, which is at the low end of expectations, not only does it not raise any money, it actually starts to cost the exchequer money. And if you just take that locally, for example, 7% nationally of students are privately educated, but locally it's in the region of 20–25% of students. So if you displace those into our state system, you're going to need a lot more state educators and a lot more money to go around, and the problem will get even worse. So to say it's costed, in this levy is, in my view, not only incorrect, it's actually the reverse.
Okay.
The question was about paying for senior people. Conservatives have 14 of year on year.
Would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, I'd like to come in and firstly just to specifically address what Jack said then. The funding assumptions that have been made by that policy have actually been corroborated by the Institute of Fiscal Studies, which I'm sure you will agree is a respected organisation, and they actually estimate it will be £1.3 billion that policy can bring in. But we can come on to that in a second. To come to your point, sir, around retention, because I think that retention point is key. And I think some of the things I gave in my earlier answer touched on it, but actually I'll expand that a little bit more if I may. So as I say, we are proposing to provide teachers with an entitlement to that high quality continual professional development training throughout their careers, and then particularly as teachers who have, like yourself, served for a long time and are starting to move up the scale to whether that be head teachers or senior school leaders and taking up that roles, we are also introducing a new 2-year mentorship programme that helps further corroborate that support package for those teachers that have been there a longer period than newly recruited teachers.
David, you wanted to come in as well.
Yes, I did. And just going back to Richard's point at the top there, I think this goes back not just for teachers, but again, go back to all key workers. You know, they're saying 6,500 new teachers are going to be brought in. They're going to bring in 28,000 police, X number of doctors. All these promises about, but it's about the people like Richard and the older teachers that are there who are established, already trained. It's the same with the police force. It's the same with doctors. We need to focus on what we can do now. The problems are now. So we need to look at how we can encourage people like Richard to stay on board, help support the new teachers as they come through, but fill these gaps now. If they retire, because many of the teachers now have gone through the nicer years of life and have accumulated a position, which is lovely, where they can retire. But we want to encourage them to come back. You know, it takes 5 years to train a policeman. I'd hate to think how many years for a teacher to gain the experience of someone like Richard or possibly yourself there. So it's my view that we need to focus on maintaining and keeping these people and bringing them back to the key areas to sort out the problems we've got now and listen to them and listen to what he's saying today.
So David, as an independent then, how would you address that should you be elected as our parliamentary
The whole idea and the whole issue with independence is bringing these questions to the table. At the moment, people aren't talking about these questions. They're throwing things at the public and saying, we're going to employ 6,500 more people. We're going to employ 28,000 more police. We're going to employ 10,000 more doctors. It takes 10 years to train a doctor. It takes 5 years to train a policeman and 2 more years at least of experience. Teachers, nurses, everyone. What are we going to do in between time? And we need that conversation right now. So what an independent would do is bring those things to Parliament that they're not prepared to talk about right now to make that change.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope that addresses the question. We'll take one more on education. I think we'd had another one up there.
Yeah, we've got a couple.
Yeah.
I just wanted to check, does anyone
Sorry.
So that's quite all right. So senior teachers don't get the credit they deserve. They don't get the financial support they deserve. In my experience at Windsor Boys, we lost many phenomenal teachers because the only progression financially for them is out of the classroom and into management roles, often or not. The problem also is that teachers are not just teachers anymore. They're counsellors, they're mentors, and the Green Party is all about trying to bring more support for mental health into education with access to qualified nurses and counsellors in all schools.
Right, thank you. I will ask, please, as we're in the proceedings, we do need you to use the microphone for your questions, please, as well, because we are on the live stream. So if you have got a question, please raise your hand and we will get round to you. Jodie, I hope you've got your trainers on. So,
I didn't put the heels
right,
on,
okay.
thankfully. Fab, we're going to come to another question on education up here, I think, before we move on. One thing to stress, we may not get to every panel member for every single question because we want to keep things moving. So, obviously, if you want to jump in to answer a question, please do so. But
just for... Okay. Right. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Yes, so I have been a science teacher in most of the secondary schools around here. Then I became a senior leadership member of a local, very successful independent school, after which I then became head teacher of 2 very successful state schools. I've got 2 points. The first one, all my life, it has been difficult to recruit teachers. Government after government have made pledges to recruit more teachers. There's no point in telling me you're going to recruit 6,500 more teachers, because I tell you now, you're not going to find them. And my question actually is maybe quite unique in that I've worked in the independent sector and in the state sector. I'm very interested, well, the first thing to say is both sectors do a fantastic job. All teachers there work hard and they all believe doing the best for the kids. They both can learn from each other. I'm really concerned that Labour, you're proposing to increase the fees, but are you really trying to get rid of independent schools? Because that seems to be a hidden agenda. And then I'm also interested to hear that one of the members on the panel mentioned that actually there are really good things we can learn from independent schools, and maybe this is something I certainly would be looking for, because I've worked in both, and I can tell you now they both could benefit from working with each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Pat, did you want to come in on that? Julian, I will come to you. I think there was a specific point. I will come to you next.
So to answer you directly, firstly, I absolutely recognise that in the independent school sector do good work. If you look at some of the community programmes they do, if you look at some of the free schools that they themselves have set up. So I certainly don't want to give the impression that I don't recognise the excellent work that they do. And I assure you there is no proposal to end the choice for parents if they choose to send their child to a private school. So there is not this great big plan around ending free schools at all. However, I am also not going to apologise for being part of a party that is seeking to equalise the opportunities and the investment for 90% of students in this country. And I appreciate locally it's a different context, which I will come on to. We have seen our schools crumble over the last 14 years. Jack spoke about record levels of funding. Well, actually, again, the IFS, a conservative-leaning organisation, has actually found that per pupil investment in the state school is lower now than it was in 2010. And I'm not going to apologise for saying that I want that to improve. So at a macro level, I do agree with the principle of the policy of VAT on private schools. However, I will say this, and this is the same I've said to people on the doorstep that have raised this issue with me. First of all, it was worth saying that any child that is on an SEM plan or is on ECHP plan, and importantly for this constituency, any of our military families that have the continuation of education allowance and choose to send their children to those schools are exempt from this policy and would not be factored in. I do think there is still a question around the implementation of this. And certainly if I am elected, I don't think we have been clear enough on what powers and regulations we can have as and when we legislate on ensuring that schools do not pass this on to the parents. And so if elected, I will make sure we are focusing, when it comes through the statute books, on that aspect.
Thank you. Julian, yeah. No, sorry, can we wait? Can you please wait? We will come to you. Please wait. We will come to you. We will give you an opportunity. We do want to hear from you all. Julian, thank you.
First of all, can I just acknowledge the questioner, Karen, and the Liberal Democrat councillor for Virginia Water. So well done. Thank you for that. Sorry, I couldn't resist it. Look, I'm sorry, but this is a bit of old Labour coming out. This is the culture. This is the sort of class war nonsense. And look, I've got an axe to grind here. I was lucky. I went to a private school, but I didn't pay for it because I was lucky and I got a scholarship, and so it was paid for me. In reality, private schools are now very, very, very expensive, and I just don't. I don't think so many people are as lucky. And as someone said up there, we can learn from private schools. Unfortunately, the private schools, there are private schools we know that have closed, and this will just. I think that's the intention. I'm sorry. And the idea that this won't fall on parents, come on. I mean, this will fall on parents. That's the whole point. So, no, I'm sorry. I think that this is old Labour. It's a bad policy. It is reasonable. It is reasonable, and it is our policy to ask schools to do more, if they don't do it already, and many do, to justify their charitable status. That's where I think Labour should have gone, but they didn't.
Thank you. Come back very briefly, please, Jack. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'd agree with Julian. I think it's very, very clear that this is an attack on both parental choice and an aspiration. I went to a comprehensive in Greater Manchester which had a creche, but you don't build a society that's more equal by attacking those more prosperous. And I think the Labour Party have got this one very, very wrong. Something like 20 to 25% of pupils in this constituency go to private schools. So if you displace something like a quarter of them into state schools, not only does it affect them and their education, but it affects each and every child in this constituency, because class sizes will be rising, and that's what old Labour attacks and aspiration always result in.
Right, thank you. Right, we would actually like to move on now as well. In the interests of time, I would like to move up the one of the subjects as well, so that we will move on to the NHS and social care.
Okay, so the question that we had come in advance from a resident was, in August 23, Rishi Sunak blamed junior doctors striking for increased wait times in the NHS. In your opinion, is that a correct assumption?
Question again, sorry. Yeah. I didn't hear it.
Please, yeah.
In August 23, Rishi Sunak blamed junior doctors striking for increased wait times in the NHS. In your opinion, is that a correct assumption?
Jack.
Well, I think it's correct to say that if, just factually, that if doctors go on strike, it's going to have a negative impact on the health service. I think, yes, it is. Very simple answer.
Okay. Thank you.
No, I think I agree that it also it had an impact, but the reality is waiting lists were going up before COVID. Waiting lists were going up before any industrial action. The Conservatives inherited an NHS that had the lowest waiting lists in history and had the highest patient satisfaction in history. They have done a very successful thing in turning that on its head. The highest waiting list in history and the lowest levels of patient satisfaction. That is what the Conservative Party does with the NHS.
David.
I'll come in as a poor little independent sitting here against all the parties arguing amongst themselves. I think, in fact, doesn't show you what the problem is in politics. I don't know. I'll give the game up. So coming back to all of these issues, no, the answer is no. We don't blame them. But the fact that people strike and the fact that people protest is a fact that things are broken. What I would like to see is we don't have strikes, we don't have protests, because we're listening to people. The teacher, the science teacher up the top there, spoke about independent schools and state schools. As the others I'll mention, I went to a private school first and then I went to a state school afterwards. So I've experienced both. But it's about us listening to people on the coalface. It's about us listening to the teachers. It's about us listening to everyone who's involved who understands it. And we shouldn't have these protests and these strikes if we do our job right in Parliament. It only happens because we're failing people and we're failing the system.
Thank you. Right, we've got our audience questions. So NHS and social care. We've got a question down here on the front.
Hello. My mum works in healthcare, and she works locally, and she works in a clinic that is heavily involved in cancer diagnosis. She has had one pay rise in the last 15 years, and that was 3%. What are you going to do about it?
Julian, would you like to start?
Okay, thank you. So So let me just, because I think that links to the original question, which was about junior doctors' pay. My view is I think that the junior doctors went about this the wrong way in asking for 35%. I think, unfortunately, they just made it a bit too easy for the government to say, oh, you're being ridiculous. If they had put it a different way, I think people would have seen that actually what they're asking for is actually a lot less unreasonable, if you like. And it links to this, the fact that the pay has not gone up. The pay has not gone up. And bluntly, we don't have enough people. And if you put it that way, you need to say, well, where does the market finish? And I suspect the answer is they need more money. Now, one of the other things, look, the NHS, it's always going to cost more money because we're all growing older. As we live longer, we can't just keep throwing more money at it. We have to stop wastage, absolutely. But we do need to be realistic about the funding. It's as simple as that. I think also, if you think from the patient's point of view, that to me is the main thing. From the patient's point of view, bluntly, people are not able to see a GP. One of the most policies I'm most proud of is this GP guarantee, that you will see a GP within 7 days or 24 hours if it's urgent. I think that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Anyone? Please? No?
Yeah. Okay.
Michael,
So,
would you like to come in, Michael, actually? Yeah.
I was just going to say thanks to your mum for her service to the NHS. My lovely girlfriend also works for the NHS, and nursing staff not paid enough. I myself have a difficult job, but I do not consider it as difficult as what nursing staff have to go through in their day-to-day life. They're shelved with abuse from people in the services, and they deal with a hell of a lot. They see a hell of a lot, and they're with us in our darkest moments. So we owe it to them to pay them a decent wage and just make sure that they can live, not go into food banks. And
Thank you. Yeah, I will apologise for that slight interruption while you were there speaking as well.
No worries,
It is very dark down the front here as well. So, yeah. Okay. Right. Have we got another question then, please, from our audience?
I think it's important that both of us have got that. Yeah.
Sorry, please. Yep.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. I mean, firstly, I do agree with a lot of what my colleagues have said about the ask that was set there. But the reality is, unless we have an economy that is stable and growing, we will not be able to give our public sector workers the pay that they do deserve. And so actually getting the economic foundations of our country right and back to a situation where we are growing our economy is key. One thing I do just want to add really quickly, because the topic is NHS and social care. At the moment, our social care sector in particular, pay conditions is appalling. Some of our social care workers are only getting paid for the appointments they go to and don't get paid travel time as they go from client to client. That has to change. So one of the first things that Labour government will do is setting up a fair pay agreement specifically looking at social care workers, because at the moment they are the people that we rely on to look after our loved ones, and they are not paid anywhere near enough or for a full day's work that they do.
Thank you. Yes, please, Jack.
Yeah, so I'd agree with a lot of what's been said here, I think. So we have been putting more money into the NHS, but it hasn't been flowing through, certainly, to rank and file staff. And I think part of that is that, obviously, demands in the NHS are outstripping inflation, so that effectively it's leaving things where you were. So I think what we should be working on, and I think collegiately, is how do we reduce demand in the NHS? I think social care is very much a key point of this. Clinicians in the NHS tell me that people are presenting with increased acuity, much older and infirm, and that is a failure of the social care system. It's also affecting our council funding. I would support an independent cross-party role commission that kind of works on a 10, 20-year cycle on social care. And I think that's the kind of thing that could put the NHS on a firmer footing and mean that the money that is going there goes a bit further.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on. We'll take another question, because we've got about 10 minutes left on this section before we'll take an interval.
A few right up the back, bear with me.
Hello. I have been a public governor of a local hospital that I'm not quite sure if it is in our constituency, but I've represented this constituency, Runnymede and Surrey Heath. And I have seen in the last 8 years how have the conditions changed. There are a number of things here which I think are great as policy, but are totally devoid of any evidence in where the data sits on the ground. NHS England is totally focused on some political moves that public has no clue about. Health Act has affected all of our services in a very significant way. You want to see your GP? Good luck. You are likely to see somebody called physician assistant. And that physician assistant is a conversion course, 2 years course person who are being now deployed to increase the numbers of people that public should see. You want to see the cancer nurse? Good luck. You are now going to see the cancer specialist, another one of those 2-year conversion course. So we have to be very clear. What are we talking about in terms of NHS system? Are we talking about 40 hospitals, of which the conversion of some of the units in our hospital is counted as a new hospital? No new hospital is just another building on the same site. So I think we have to be really clear, because we have already heard in the previous section from Conservative candidate, a big porky. And he has just repeated what Sunak has mentioned in terms of England being the top on the pupils ranking in the PISA 2022. That is a lie. And I can quote, and I've got here a quote from the government report from December 2023, where they very clearly say that England has come 8, well behind Canada, Ireland, Estonia, a number of other countries.
Right. So thank you for your experience and your service as well. But please, can you? What's the question, please, that we have here for our panel?
The question is, when are they going to address the real facts on the ground, as opposed to talk about policies that are totally devoid of what is happening at the moment?
Okay. So I think you mentioned the new proposed physician assistants as there. I think that was something that you touched on within
They're
that.
already there. They're not new.
Right, okay.
I'm happy to take this one. I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier and what the ladies really touched on tonight, is about listening to people on the coalface. It's about listening to what really needs to be done now and what can be done now. We need to be visionary and we need to create and we need to listen to the people who know what needs to be done. A lot of people sit there and they say they come up with the ideas, a small cabinet sits there and decides for the country what's going to happen. This doesn't work. The situation is we need to listen to the people, we need to join together, and we need to have joined up adult politics about what we can fix and what we can do. There was a conversation earlier about what can an independent do or what can anyone do. I think we've seen this tonight, and I have to thank Jack for bringing up the collaboration, a collegiate approach, because that's what an independent can do. It can change the minds of politicians and how they think and how they work. And this is what we need to do. We need to come up and support local people, the teachers, the doctors, the nurses, the key workers, the agencies, the police, all these people who run our society for us. And we need to listen to them, and we need to put on the table solutions that help now. And then we need to look at medium-term and longer-term solutions, because it is a really, really big fix, and we need to join together, all of us together. It shouldn't be one party or one person. They cannot fix it all. We need to join together and have an approach to work with the people and with everyone else to fix it.
Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't expecting to have agreement so soon in the evening's proceedings. We'll take one more question then, I think we've got.
I've actually got one that has come in via the live stream. So this question is, £4 billion worth of unusable PPE is apparently to be burned. How can we trust NHS funding to a party that thinks this is acceptable?
So this is regarding the PPE contracts that we have. Julian.
Yeah, let's just start with that one, and then I'll, because it's a link, there's a link to the previous question, actually. So Look, the COVID crisis took everyone by surprise, and any government would have struggled, no doubt. But it's really shocking and sad looking back at just some of the crony contracts that were given over PPE. And it's just absolutely disgusting just how official channels were circumvented. And unfortunately, who's paying for this? Well, you are, we all are. Now, also, just going back to the previous question, I also totally agree. We need to get real and be honest. I think the lady said that, yes, the 40 new hospitals that were to be built? But it wasn't quite new hospitals. I think one was a car park. And it's just, this is everything that's wrong with this Conservative government. Yeah, I mean, I think one last point, just in terms of Liberal Democrat policy. So one of our key things about the GP guarantee, obviously how will we do that? Well, we'll need to recruit people. We'll need an extra 8,000 full-time equivalent. But I think that doesn't mean we actually go and recruit 8,000. We think we need to do some, but actually we also need to retain the people we have.
Thank you. Jack, would you like to come back on that one?
I'll come back to Lily's question at the top, where she talked about, I think, nurse practitioners. I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing if it helps create capacity where it's needed. So, for example, there's a new rollout of a scheme called Pharmacy First earlier this year, and that's empowered pharmacists to treat over-the-counter more routine conditions, things like, for example, tonsillitis. I think if we can get routine things like that off the GP's plate, and that's, when I go to the GP, touch wood, that's usually the kind of thing that I'm there, and that means that my grandmother can see the GP sooner. I think that's the kind of sensible stuff. I don't know the difference. I'm sorry, Lily. We can chat afterwards.
Right. The question that we had was regarding the actual unusable £4 billion worth of unusable PPE, which is going to be burnt.
Well, my understanding of PPE is that it has a definite lifespan, and I think it's desirable that the NHS keeps an appropriate stockpile of that, and if it's not used, that's a good thing.
Can you tell us about the missing 400 million from property sales? Right, please do not shout out questions. Can you please, we'll bring the microphone there.
Yeah, just coming in firstly on the COVID question. I mean, as Julian said, obviously that was an unprecedented event, and I could forgive some mistakes being made. What I cannot forgive was a wanton disregard for good governance in regards to these contracts. Now, what Labour has said we will do is institute a COVID corruption commissioner looking to where we can recoup some of that money that went onto some of these contracts, because it is actually astounding, not only the level of waste that we are talking about, but the erosion of governance norms that went around these decisions, and that we need to be able to call it out. And I did just want to touch on Lily's question, because I think the point she raises are right, because you are seeing increasingly, when you think you are seeing your GP, that you are instead seeing a physician's assistant. Now, whilst I agree that that in itself is not a problem, I think the problem is when the expectation you have is of who you will be seeing is not being met. That's not necessarily being honest with the patient. So we are looking around making sure that we can bring back almost the family doctor in the neighbourhood, and part of that is also trialling neighbourhood health centres, which can service a wider range of those kind of immediate health needs to help free up some of the capacity in GP surgeries.
Thank you. Michael, did you want to come in?
Hello. So access to GPs is essential, especially for prevention and early detection. So, I share your concerns about GPs, GP assistants that are, 2 years in practice. Also about to the PPE. This PPE was never fit for purpose, so it was never fit for purpose, and many people in the NHS didn't have access to PPE because of that. And the fact that it's going to be burnt, and the majority of it is plastic, of course, is abhorrent to the environmental impact that will make, especially considering how much of it there is.
I'm going to wrap up this section now. We will be taking a 15-minute break, and then we will recommence at 9 p.m. Thank you. Good evening and welcome back to part 2 of our Windsor Hustings. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back the prospective parliamentary candidates. Right. Sorry. So we'll move on with our Q&A, and our first topic for the second half is going to be cost of living and living standards.
Thank you. So the first resident question that we have is, what are your views on the wealth tax? Do you support it? And do you think taxing the top 1% of earners to a greater degree is the fairest course of action?
So our question, what's your views on the wealth tax? Do you support it? And do you think taxing the top 1% of earners to a greater degree is the fairest course of action? Julian.
Hello. Well, look, we believe that taxation should be fair. I mean, let's just be clear about this. This economy is really struggling, and with a shambolic mini budget that sent interest rates soaring, hitting the tax has gone up. It's the highest burden we've ever had. And yes, there are people who can pay more, and actually the idea of a wealth tax is something that actually we've certainly talked about before, but it's not something we're proposing at the moment. I think that the idea of taxing income is, I think, fairer. What we have said, however, is that it isn't right that some people's income is through capital gains tax, and that is taxed at a different and a lower rate. And that's one of the key things that we should do. Now, that is taxed. It's not necessarily the top 1%, but that is a tax typically paid for by the richest, and that should be taxed at the same amount. It should be fair. It should be fair, and everyone should pay we shouldn't be punitive in taxation, but everyone needs to pay their fair share.
Thank you. Jack, would you like to come on
Yeah,
that?
I can do. Look, it's tough out there. I think everybody's feeling it. Although that's obviously relative for people in the different spectrums, and we see it in our public services. But what is the only way that we create wealth in this country, which will flow to our pockets into public services? It's to get the economy to grow. I think if you've got a taxation policy which tries to attack, for example, wealth creators, I think you end up in a cycle whereby the economy will be damaged, and ultimately it's the people at the bottom that will be worse off as a result. I think it's analogous really to the independent school fees. I think you should be careful what you wish for in terms of these kind of punitive proposals.
Thank you. Because of the importance of this question, I would like each of you to answer that, please. So, Pav, would you like to pick up on that?
Yeah, I think in principle, we do want to see a fair and equitable tax system where those with the broadest shoulders are the ones paying. But I do agree with some of the points that have been made already. Actually, workers of all stripes have been hit by the Tories' disastrous management of the economy. And Labour has committed to not raising any tax on workers, so whether that's income tax or VAT. We do also want to make sure that aspiration is built into our system. So those wealth creators, we want them to be investing in our country and in our enterprise rather than taking that wealth elsewhere. But one thing I would say that is extremely unequitable at the moment is when you look at the rise of some of the online giant corporations who are not paying their fair share of tax and actually have, in some cases, a much more beneficial system that not only means that they're not paying their fair share of tax for the sales that they make in this country, there's also having a knock-on impact to high streets up and down the country and small businesses that fuel our high streets because they are not on fair playing terms. So I personally would rather we focus on making sure that those large corporations who do not currently have to pay in the same challenges that our small and medium-sized businesses do, have to contribute more for the sales that they make in this country.
David.
Oh, thank you. One of the things I've learned about wealth is that wealth is global. Now, we can sit here and we can say we're going to tax the highest 1% earners. Best respects, the best 1% earners can go anywhere they want in the world. They don't have to stay here. So I don't think it's the solution. I think what we need to do is talk and sit down and discuss how we all work together, whether you're a high wage earner, you're on benefits. These things need to be discussed. We need to look at what the implications are and how we can really, really stop taxation. Now, we spoke about growth. We know that the only answer to higher taxation is growth, because that's the only answer we've got now. But no one talks about how they're going to grow the economy. So we need really, really grown-up conversations about what does that mean. You talk about growth, dragging us out of growth. So my view is that we need to all get together in Parliament and sit down and discuss these big topics that everyone skirts around. It's very much like we've spoke about with all the key workers. We're skirting around the issues. And the situation is you're not just going to get away with taxing the wealthy and the largest corporations in the world. It isn't going to work unless the whole of the world join together with us with the same approach. But what
Point there about growth then, would any of the candidates like to come back in terms of how do you then see bringing growth into the economy?
Can I bring one up, Jamie, just for discussion first, and then if everyone wants to come back?
Last point, but I would like that because I think that's an important point that I think should be addressed.
Yeah, so the situation with growth is coming up with new ideas. The situation is that the way we create growth is very much like the Industrial Revolution. The situation is we need that seismic change in growth. It's no good just tweaking things and changing things. We need to create a stimulus to create growth in our country. Now, one of the ideas is we know the housing market is broken. We need to release properties and housing. So why don't we have a conversation about that market and releasing that money and creating a wealth fund?
Let's get on. So the point there was about growth then.
You are specifically about growth. Well, there's one elephant in the room, and I apologise in advance for saying it here. So guess what? When the coalition happened 2010 to 2016, 2015, up to Q1 2016, Britain was the fastest growing country in the G7. Then something happened. Something happened in the middle of 2016 and it all went wrong. Now, what was that? Now, I'm sorry to say that yes, I'm not going to say the B word, but you all know what it is. But here's the thing. Look, Brexit's happened. Oh, God, I said it. But we need to improve that deal. And this is where I'm afraid Labour and the Conservative are either totally in denial or not willing to address it. And I'm sorry, but there's no credibility unless we've said we should, in the medium term, rejoin the single market. That's the big thing we need to happen that will bring back growth to this country.
So the question is about growth. Pav?
Yeah. Growth in our country and in our economy needs to be the single number one priority of the next government. We have seen stagnation and actually recession for far too long. And to deliver that growth, it requires several things. Firstly, it does require stability. When we are asking businesses and corporations to make decisions for the long term, what they do not need is a constant changing of policies one day, changing the policy the next day. This is not how business make investment decisions to invest in our country. So bringing that stability back is key. But actually, I'm going to pick on something that David started to touch on, because he is right. Homes are a great stimulus for the economy. Not only do we need homes to actually provide a roof over the people's heads, it does help bring that growth back into our country. So the Labour Party is proposing building 1.5 million homes. We are also proposing a national wealth fund, which I believe David was coming on to talk about, really harnessing using public investment to harness 3 times as much private investment into these industries that will deliver tangible and real growing change in our economy. And then finally, we do need to make sure we have something that the Conservative Party has failed to deliver for the 14 years that they've been in government, and that is an industrial strategy that sets out clearly where the country needs to go, the skills that we need, and how we will get there, working in partnership with our unions, with our workforce, and with communities like yours, on making sure that we can deliver the growth that this country desperately needs.
Thank you. Michael, I do want to bring you in. Sorry, so there was two questions there, so just a recap for you then. So our initial question was regarding the wealth tax. Do you support it? And do you think taxing the top 1% of earners to a greater degree is the fairest course of action? That you have regarding then how we bring growth into the economy?
I think I'm going to go with growth first. To deliver growth, we need a Green New Deal. We need to grow the economy in that way by investing in renewable energies. And also by rejoining the single market. Brexit has been a huge factor in destroying the economy. Liz Truss, disastrous also for the economy. So I think it's essential that we do rejoin the single market. And, you know, I don't think anybody at this stage would want to go through the rigmarole of Brexit again. And I'm quite happy that rejoining the single market is a good halfway point to sustain the economy and deliver growth.
Thank you. Right, we'll now start taking audience questions.
Can I actually answer the other part of the question as well?
I think you did. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of taxing wealth fairly, in 2020, the wealthiest 10% of households held 43% of the wealth in Great Britain. We all want public services, and a wealth tax on the 1% is not going to affect, I'd imagine, most people in this room, but it will improve the lives of most people in this room and deliver those vital public services that we all need, we all depend upon, such as the NHS, rail, and everything else.
Thank you. Right, sorry, we will move on to some audience questions now. So our topic then, we are doing the economy, cost of living and living standards.
I've got a few people who already put their hands up. So what I'm just going to say to everybody, when you come around to ask your question, if you could keep it nice and concise, because we want to get around as many people as possible. I'm going to head down here first.
Thank you. Very concise. In 2010, there were 30 food banks. They gave out 65,000 parcels. In the last figures, there were 3,700 food banks across the UK giving out approximately 2.4 million parcels. Are food banks now a feature of the social welfare system of one of the richest countries in the world?
Right. So, sorry, just then recap. Our question is regarding the use then of food banks and the increase that we've seen in them across the country. Yes? Yeah, okay.
I'll come in and answer that. Unfortunately, at the moment, yes, they are. And it is a shame that they are. And frankly, the Tories should wear that as a mark of shame over their last 14 years of delivery. We should not have to rely on food banks to have to feed our citizens. What's more worrying, we've seen the use of food banks in Windsor itself nearly triple since 2010. And most often, these people who are in receipt of food parcels are in work. So the fundamental thing that we need to make sure we get right is making work pay. And some of that is around, we can talk about pay standards, and that is part of the conversation. But it is also around making sure that people have consistency in their work, that they have pride and they are treated with dignity in their work. There is too many people in our country today who are having to work on 0 hours contract, undergo the shame of fire and rehire. It is not on, and the Labour government would put that to right on day one with a new deal for working people. It is as I say, it is shameful that in this day and age, in 2024, under the Conservatives' watch, there are people who have to rely on food banks. That needs to change, and it needs to change now.
David? Yep, David, thank you.
The gentleman's 100% right, but it's due to a failed state. The situation is that all of the political parties over decades have sat behind this situation and created an economy that isn't growing, a situation where the tax burden is the highest in the history. Businesses are failing, people are being pushed into poverty all the time. It's because no one's got together and sorted these problems out. And I keep talking about joining together. It's no good one party and one ideology trying to sort this problem out. It's huge, and it needs really joined up politics to sit around a table and sit and sort this out together. You will not sort it out on your own. We need to join together, and we need to face the facts that there is a serious problem, the system is broken, and we need to fix it. And it's no good talking about from day one, we're going to do this on day one. I accept we all want to do it, but let's please join together and just come up with the answers for people who are going into food banks every day, people who are losing their homes, all these things. We need to really sit down and face it head on and stop talking politics and start talking about people.
Thank you. Another candidate would like to jump in. So we're talking about the use of food banks across the country, how they have increased.
So I agree with David that this is a multifaceted problem which we're all called to try to be part of the solution. I think affordable housing is a big part of that. I think that locally housing costs of what is having extreme stress on a lot of working people's budget. So, you know, I would support my colleagues here's comments on affordable housing, particularly social housing. I think the Conservative Party hasn't done enough on social housing. I support the right to buy policy, for example, but I think it's clear that we should have been much stricter about protecting those receipts in terms of building more social housing. That's certainly one aspect of it. I think there's a mental health challenge. We obviously need more mental health services in this country. But obviously the only routes out of poverty that exist are kind of jobs and education, and I think we need to make sure that we're doing the right things on the economy to try to the best alleviate the situation as possible.
Thank you. Wait, can you just, we'll bring the microphone. So the follow-up then regarding, do you feel...
specifically about food banks.
Are
they now part of the social welfare system of this country, which is one of the richest in the world? Can you answer that specifically about food banks?
Well, they shouldn't be, is the answer, but it obviously is a fact on the ground today. And the only way we get out of that is jobs, education, affordable housing. It's a multifaceted solution. There is not a simple silver bullet on this as we use it.
Thank you. Right, do we have more questions, please? We've got...
Yes,
oh,
hello.
There's then the lady just behind you there. Thank you.
May I just make a contribution of fact? The City of London didn't succeed in Europe. When it went through its statistics, it wasn't very successful. And it's now going for a global approach, which contributes significantly to Britain's GDP. Capital gains tax is paid by risk takers. And should they be treated the same as everybody else, or should they be treated differently? And one other point, Ireland has the lowest corporation tax and is the wealthiest European country, gathering the taxes of the FANG technology companies. So my question is, why tax the greatest contributors to wealth?
So,
I think that's aimed at me. Sorry.
So we've got 2 points there regarding capital gains tax, and then regarding Ireland as well, and how they have the tech companies, I think is what we're talking about there, and the tax revenues that they take in as a result of that. Julian, then?
Right, so first of all, capital gains tax is paid when by making a profit on the sale of capital assets. So yes, it's paid on shares, but it's also paid, it's the other assets as well. And all we are saying is that it should be taxed in the same way as income, so that everyone pays their fair share. It's as simple as that. And just one word about Ireland, they seem to be in the single market.
Okay. We've got our follow-up.
On that question.
We do need to be moving on. I'll give you
a
brief. Please be brief.
It's very important. The gentleman spoke about risk takers. I think, you know, being a businessman, I've been a businessman, I've owned my own businesses for 40 years. People would call me a risk taker. But as an independent, I think I'm taking a big risk funding my own campaign and putting skin in the game to do this. So I totally agree. It is risk takers who drive this economy, the small businessmen, the independent business people who do that. And taxing people of the high earners is not the only solution. So my answer is to the individual, yes, the risk takers are the future of this economy, as much as the workers.
I come in on that as well, and I would largely agree with David here, right? So, you know, Pav's trying to have it two ways. She's spending money on schools and hospitals, and she says she's not going to tax workers. But there's 17 things you haven't ruled out, and that almost always is aimed at the risk takers, right? So whether that's pension contributions, whether that's the lump sum allowance for retirees, whether that's council tax, stamp duty, capital gains tax, all of these things are kind of things that are going to have to be raised to pay for Labour spending commitments. And if you want to talk about growth, the best way to throw away growth in this country is to go after exactly the people that you've described, Mr. Waddleton, and that would not be a Conservative approach to the economy.
Come back on that.
Yeah, I mean, we've been absolutely clear that we're not even raising capital gains tax. And actually, if you look at what's happened with pensioners, in particular, over the Conservative government, Jack talks about the lump sum of the pension, when over 100,000 pensioners more have had to take and draw down their lump sum under the Conservative Party because of what they deliver. So don't talk to me about record, because look at your record. It's time for change.
Michael.
Just to
Please,
come in
Michael.
on the issue of tax avoidance. The Green Party will clamp down on tax dodging. Companies and individuals who fail to pay their fair share. It deprives the public of vital money for public services and much needed investment. Greens support small businesses, and they are currently paying taxes for the services they use. And we will take steps to tackle the global corporations are not. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. Let's take another question, please, from the audience.
Hi, guys. Right, so just reflecting on what the chap said there, lots of talk of listening to the public, but all are against Brexit, but people feel ignored, welcome Nigel and reform. So to my question, obsession with growth. COVID gravy train, we saw the massive corruption of the government spending hundreds of millions of pounds with pals. The planet can't sustain growth. The environment needs to see degrowth. Would you concede we need to have that conversation?
Okay, so Brexit related, that question then again, can we...
Forget the Brexit, that was just...
Quite, but growth is the point then.
Growth is
yes,
the point.
yeah,
Degrowth.
yeah.
No, degrowth
I think, John, you won't be surprised to know I disagree with you 100%. John was advocating the degrowth policy. He says that effectively it's a climate environment point.
I'm happy to cut, since no one else is speaking, I'm going to say this. No, but there is a balance to be had. I think people need food on the table. People need jobs to get food on the table. Growth is not something to be afraid of. On the other hand, you're right, it can't cost the planet. Can we balance it? Yes, I think we can, and we have to.
Can I come in? It doesn't have to be an either-or. Actually, if you look at the opportunities in the green industries that deliver genuine climate change progress for our country, that can also mean growth for our economy. So they're not mutually exclusive. And what we do need is a government that is committed to providing that stability and moving forward on the climate change agenda that also delivers growth for our economy.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, though,
Michael?
the Labour Party have reneged on many of their green policies. If you want green growth, which is, I think, the essential for, improving our environment and funding our public services, then the only option is to vote for the Green Party.
There were two comments there. So, Julian, I think you were picking up on what Michael was saying about the Labour Party then reneging on policy as well. And Pav, did you then want to address that?
No, what Michael is referring to is the £28 billion of investment in the green investment policy. The policy is still there, but equally we've been touching on throughout this course of this debate around the need to rebuild trust with voters, trust in politics, and with voters wanting politicians to be honest. And the honest truth is, at the time that commitment was made, there's been several things that have happened then, not least Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget. We simply do not want to lie and say that we would be able to fund that. The ambition is still the same. The policies to help deliver that are still within the manifesto, but we are not going to be making unfunded spending commitments that cannot be delivered.
Okay.
We're spilling over, I think, probably into the next topic a little
We
bit.
are,
But maybe we've done it naturally already.
Yeah.
So just to get to the nub of the point, since 1990 to about today, we've halved, by we I mean the UK, have halved our carbon emissions, but the economy has grown 79%. So to the nub of John's point, I don't think it is necessarily true that more economic growth means carbon emissions. Obviously, we need to be moving towards a net zero economy. I think we're more practical than some of the other parties in terms of how we approach that. But having halved our carbon emissions since 1990, but had growth of 79%, I don't think the two are necessarily as aligned as you might suggest.
Thank you. I think at this point we will move on then. So our next subject is then climate and environment.
So that was the perfect segue. Do you believe reaching net zero by 2050 is a workable, realistic commitment? Do you think we could go further, more quickly, and how?
Okay. Just repeat the question. Do you believe reaching net zero by 2050 is a workable, realistic commitment? Do you think we could go further, quicker, and how?
Come in on that one, Jamie, because I've not answered the previous question. The answer is we have to move towards net zero as fast as we possibly can. But I think we have to be realistic at the moment, and we have to balance what we've all said here tonight. There has to be a conversation, as John said, and there has to be a conversation about how we're going to do it without putting on more tax burden onto people and communities. I think we underestimate the tax burden that's going to come for the next decade or more. I think we don't realise we've got the highest tax burden now. What's coming is far, far worse. So the situation is, we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. So I think in best respects, of course, we chase in every policy and every decision. It's in our DNA to make as much progress as we can, if not achieving the target of net zero. But we have to balance the fact of the economy against the burden on people and taxation. So I think that's we've got to be realists here, and we've got to have real conversations. You know, we can chase a dream, we can do, but yes, of course we want to get to net zero. Without a planet, we've got nothing. We've got no economy, we've got no growth, we've got none of the things we talk about. We haven't got life, we haven't got existence. But the point being is that we have to balance it with the abilities. And we also have to open up a conversation about other countries around the world, you know, what they're doing and what we can do to offset what they're doing. We're a very small country in comparison to some, and we have to have those strong conversations, as they have with us on things like NATO. We have to have the same conversation with them regarding their carbon emissions, because that really affects us and it can help us balance our economy, but we need these big conversations.
Thank you, David.
Run away from it.
Michael, would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, achieving net zero by 2050 is going to be impossible unless we take bold action. And I think, realistically speaking, the Green Party is the only party out there that are offering bold action on climate change. So in terms of electrifying the railways, it's all of these policies that are in this manifesto, all of them are underpinned by green thoughts, and all of them are based on green principles. And there are green solutions to the problems that we face as a country. So if we want to achieve net zero goals, then we need to elect green MPs.
Thank you. Julian.
So the Liberal Democrat target is 2045. We have to meet net zero by 2050 because we need to pass a good climate on to our next generations. But here's just a couple of points. There is a balance here. There is a pragmatism that needs to happen, but we also need to be really tough as well. So, for example, power gen, that has to be one of the things that goes first, because we've said that look, renewables. We need almost 90% of the UK's electricity generated by renewables by 2030. Now that might sound like, well, you're joking. That's only a few years away. If we're going to reach 2050 or 2045 or 2050, we have to do power gen first. It has to come first. And one more thing I will just say. So the Conservatives like to talk the talk on pragmatism here, but I think they are neither reasonable on net zero nor are they pragmatic. Just last year there was they sort of backdated. They said, oh yes, the new cars don't need to be electric by 2035. Guess what? These car manufacturers, they didn't say, oh, thank you that you released a great burden of us. They'd already planned it. It was already happening. And this is the thing, so long as the legislation is there, companies will cope. It'll be fine. So long as it's reasonable, just do it. Don't change the rules because you've got an internal party disagreement about net zero and whether it's actually something you want to do.
Jack, would you like to come back on that, please?
Yeah, we'll do, yeah. So I think we should be positive about the success story that the United Kingdom is in this space. So I use those statistics to John there. 1990 to 2022, we've halved our carbon emissions. That makes us the top performer in the G7. For example, just for comparison purposes, France reduced its by 23%, and the USA pretty much no change whatsoever. I agree with Julian that electrifying our electricity supply is a good place to start. In 2010, about 10% of our energy came from renewables, and this year it's going to approach 40%. That has been a cross-party effort, I would say. So a lot of that was underpinned by Ed Miliband's legislation. I know Ed Davey worked on this in coalition, and I would like to associate myself with those kind of policies. But what I would say is our net zero policy has to be realistic. Right, so we pushed the net zero goal, I think I'm right to say, from 2040 to 2050, because what the 2040 thing, it was a directional piece of legislation that said we want to do this, but really without the practical way of doing it. I think we have to do this in such a way that we bring obviously the economy with us, and we have a practical plan for delivery, and I'm confident that 2050 is the kind of time frame where we can do this in a sensible pace.
Thank you. Pav?
Yeah, I'll come in. Firstly, I just want to agree with Julian's point, and it reflects the point I made earlier around businesses needing stability and consistency in policies. If you're asking businesses to invest in this area, you know, they don't need to make that investment only to have the legislation completely ripped up every time there's a new fight in the Conservative Party. Now, is the ambition, is it achievable? Yes, it is, and it needs to be. But to get there, we do need to do three things, I would say, and we need government to do three things. First of all, we need government support to co-invest in the new industries that are needing to come along. So things like floating offshore wind, things like making sure we make the most of tidal power and hydrogen. We need to have that government initial investment in bringing forward these new industries. Secondly, where we do have mature technologies that exist already, so such as wind, solar and hydrogen, and nuclear, I should say, we need to scale up significantly the delivery of these mature technologies that are already working. We need to scale them up around our country. And then the final point I would say, we do need the government to support local, municipal and community energy projects. And the Labour Party does have a proposal to allow partnership working at a local level for up to 8 gigawatts of energy projects. And enabling and expanding the network of these kind of community-owned initiatives will make a significant contribution towards us meeting that ambition.
Thank you. Right, I do want to move on and get more audience questions, please.
We've got a couple up here and then I'll head back down.
Thank you. I own and run a national energy efficiency business. It was going very well until your boss, Jack, wrecked the very sensible national standards that we were enjoying in the United Kingdom last September. And it was your boss, Jack, who did it. It was completely unforgivable. It has harmed my business. It has harmed the people who work for me. We have had to lay people off. Can you imagine that, Jack? An energy efficiency business in the UK laying people off at a time like this. It is unforgivable what Rishi Sunak has done to this area where we're trying to make things better for the people of Britain. So I'm very interested to ask each one of you as the candidates, if I gave you my vote, what would you do specifically for the people in Windsor to help us on our journey to a green electric future, which is what we have to do? The scientists tell us, and I believe them.
Right, so just to recap, quite a response there from our audience as well. Moving to a green electric future, what would you do for the residents of Windsor?
So I think I'll come back to the gentleman first. So, sir, I'm sorry to hear that that's happened to your business and particularly to your staff. But I would correct you in the sense that Rishi Sunak isn't my boss. I'm standing to be Windsor's Member of Parliament, and the electors of Windsor will be my boss if I'm successfully elected. You talk about where I would use money. So we've talked about the electrification of power. Our power system is about a third of our carbon emissions at the moment. Another third is transport. So as we green our electrical system, it's important that we electrify much more heating and transport in order for it to get the benefits of that. So for me, I would be encouraging putting that money perhaps into electric vehicle charging points, that kind of thing, so we can get that third of carbon emissions, which are responsible for transport locally, into a greener and greener grid every year.
Thank you. David?
Well, firstly, I'd like to welcome Jack into the independents, because really, you know, the situation is it's the only chance you've got if you're going to walk away from your party. But you know... I'm not quite sure I said that. Well, OK. But, you know, it's the real world. We talk about the real world. The gentleman was talking about food banks earlier. We have to push forward on all of the commitments to the greener energy. I accept that. I'm one of the real people who push for these types of things. I don't believe we should give up on anything. It should be part of our DNA. In everything that we build, everything that we do, it should be about pushing that situation. But I have to, in this, we were talking about 2019. I sat here in 2019. Totally different situation to how it is today. It was already on the way, but now we are where we are. The situation is there are millions of children with in food poverty. We have food banks everywhere. We have to balance it. We have to have these big conversations, and I fully support the targets that we have. But we have to have these big conversations and balance it out of where we go and what we do. We can't just force ourselves down that route. In the short term, we still have to keep our targets, but we have to have these conversations. And in the gentleman's business, I've been in business, as I said earlier on, 40 years. It's a tragedy that you've actually suffered that way, and your staff. And I've had to make people redundant. It is the hardest and worst thing you will possibly do. And you should never have been put in that position. But if we have these big conversations, we will protect the businesses who are investing in these futures, and we will make it happen together.
Thank you. Julian.
Yes, Martin, just very, very quickly, absolutely. Isn't it wrong that that an energy efficiency business is actually ramping down rather than ramping up? That is the wrong way round. I've got nothing to add. You're absolutely right. We have to. It's not a choice between the economy and the green agenda. We have to do both.
Pav, can I come to you, please, briefly? Pav.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, sir, I'm also sorry to hear about your situation. And you and the story you just told was a very practical example of the point I was making about the lack of consistency and stability for businesses like yours to changing policies that have long-term impact on a whim. So just coming, if I may, locally, I think there's a few things that myself and the Labour Party would be looking to do. So firstly, at the moment, the way in which the Conservatives have run our energy sector, it means that we have been much more exposed to international energy markets, which not only has an impact on the delivery of energy, but it has a significant impact on the cost that we are having to pay. So actually really supercharging the opportunity for our country to be a clean superpower will deliver not only significant economic benefits in terms of job opportunities, but it would also deliver cheaper energy costs to residents in Windsor. The other aspects I would do is looking at our homes. So firstly, we need to make sure that all of our homes are better insulated to help protect against some of the energy costs. And the party also has a proposal that any new housing that is currently being built would need to have a higher EPC energy performance certificate standard than it does currently. So setting higher expectations and setting higher standards for the building trade actually delivers lower cost for residents.
Thank you. Right. Michael?
Yeah, there are really simple solutions. Touching on the point that Pav made there, insulating homes. It reduces waste and pollution into the environment. There's others as well, obviously the electrification of public transport. Probably one of the easiest train lines in the world to electrify would be the Windsor to Slough branch of the Great Western Railway. And they stopped short of it in the last government. And it's a great shame because the pollution that diesel engine brings into the town centre of Windsor is phenomenal. That train goes back and forth multiple times during the day. I think it's a couple of times per hour, but 4 times per hour, isn't it? So the fact that is a diesel-run train is crazy because, it should be an electrified line, and it should have been an electrified line a long time ago.
Okay, thank you. Now, we do actually want to be moving on because we have got local issues still to cover with all of you. I can take one more question, or should we move on to local issues? Move on? Right, okay, thank you. Yep, that's what I like. Okay, so we will then proceed into our local issues.
So the question to start with from a resident. Our previous MP garnered the nickname Absent Adam. What word would you hope your constituents would use to describe you if you were elected?
Right. Would you like me to repeat that? Yes, yeah. Our previous MP garnered the nickname Absent Adam. What word would you hope your constituents would use to describe yourself if you were elected?
Accessible.
Word answer, I like that.
I'm going to say that because that's the bread and butter of what an MP should do. Dedicated.
Okay. Julian?
Sorry, I was trying to find some alliteration for Julian. I'll be hard-working. If anyone can think of a J, yeah.
Okay, Michael.
I've actually got one that someone gave me. I replied to an email and they responded to me that I'd given them hope. And that's what I'd want to be.
Thank you. David.
Oh, unfortunately, I haven't got a quick answer for that one. But, you know, the people and the residents who have worked with me now for 5 years have seen me dedicated. And I'd say the buck stops here. That's my logo. There's no coming away from it. I'm accountable and I will stand there by your side.
Thank you. Thank you. Right, should we take an audience question then, please?
Yes, we've got lots and lots up here, so I'm coming to this lady first, 'cause she was very patient last time.
So my question is about our local rivers, and I think everyone has agreed that they've reached an unacceptable and unsafe level, and I just would be interested in what steps you'd make to reverse that, and specifically with what you do with the governance of rivers.
Okay, so regarding then our local rivers, what steps would you take to improve them and then actually to then reverse the state of where we are today?
I'll take that, if I may. Yeah, so I think locally, the particular disgraceful aspect of what we're seeing is what we're seeing around Eton Wick at the Dorney pumping station there. That is frequently at capacity. And what we're seeing is that when that's at capacity, instead of being even taken to the Thames, which is a necessary evil in some sense, it's just being put in the moor around Tilstone Close. And people are seeing that in their back gardens. That's absolutely unacceptable. I'd be fighting for two things there. I'd be fighting for the connection to the Thames, which is promised, but that's a sticking plaster in the short term. What we really need to do is fight for capital investment there to increase the capacity such that we can reduce the need for that in the future. And that's what I'll be fighting for as your Member of Parliament.
Thank you. David.
Okay, well, it's an interesting one. So the situation is that the system was built in 1850 with a population of 20 million. We now have a population of coming close to 70 million, and we've had very little investment in infrastructure requirements. We've had billions of pounds of investment taken out in terms of debt that's put onto the businesses and dividends taken out. But being the chairman of the local flood group locally, I know all about what's going on with flooding. And the situation is that it's not going to, you know, we need to spend £200 billion repairing our sewage and water system. It isn't a quick fix. It shouldn't go back onto taxpayers. It should go back to the corporations and the mercenary approach that they've had to asset stripping our utilities and taking that money and running away. We need to put mechanisms in place to rebuild our infrastructure, but we cannot do it just on the back of local taxpayers. It must come back in terms of getting those dividends back and getting those debt payments down from those companies, by those investors reinvesting back into the infrastructure. But we have to see it being rebuilt. 1850, the Victorians were fantastic, but let's be honest now, we need to rebuild the infrastructure, and we just do not have the money and means to do it without putting more burden on the taxpayers.
Right. Thank you, David.
We have to avoid that. Thank
Michael.
The Jubilee River failed as a flood prevention scheme. Channel 1 is the way forward in terms of preventing flooding. In terms of pollution in our water systems, it's been happening for far too long, and the companies that are doing it ought to be ashamed of themselves firstly, and they ought to be held accountable financially. I suggest that for the long-term prosperity of our water supply, in terms of sewerage and the provision of clean water, we need to end privatisation and bring nationalisation back into our water supplies.
Okay, thank you. Pav, would you like to come in on that?
I think the issue with our water companies is a particularly troubling one, to put it lightly. And I think in particular because when you have a system like this that is effectively monopolised, we do not have a choice about using Thames water here locally. And what has been allowed to happen for too long is actually shocking and shameful. Now, when there was legislation proposed that would actually hold the water companies to account, the Conservative Party and the absent MP here voted against it. So what we need to do is twofold. First of all, because the other thing, sorry, if I may, at the same time as they are giving us a shocking service, discharging more sewage in our rivers in Thames Water than any other water company in the country. They're also proposing to raise our bills by 56%, and they were proposing to pay their shareholders a record dividend. It's just unacceptable. We need a government and an MP that is not willing to put up with this and actually hold them to account for their performance. Now, the two things that we will be doing: firstly, legislating to give the regulator tougher powers to stop dividend payments to shareholders when a company such as Thames Water is performing as badly as it does. And secondly, introducing a new corporate criminal liability charge, so for the bosses of these water companies that continually flout these rules and regulations, that they will be held criminally liable.
Right, thank you. Julian, thank you.
So I don't know how many of you have watched World's Strongest Man, and I hasten to add, I'm not this, but lifting weeds or reeds out of the very stream that we're talking, the Boveney stream, really, really hard. It's like literally, it's like one of those, you have to lift it above your head. Now, we can't do that at the moment. Why can't we do that? Because we've had the spawning season, and yet, just weeks before, we've had a flooding, which has released raw. That it's normally clean sewage goes in sewage water, but this was raw sewage. So you've got this balmy situation where I know you can't clear the reeds because you might damage the spawn, but there's pollution that have killed them anyway. I mean, it's just balmy. What should we do? We need tougher regulation, and we also need collaboration. One of the problems there, apart from it's on the border of like literally Bucks, Berks, the constituency and all that sort of thing, there's this landowner, there's that owner, there's Thames Water, there's the Environment Agency, and it's just no one talking to each other. One of the things as MP is it's about getting people in a room together and collaborating for the greater good.
Thank you. Right, we have got lots of questions in this section. Can I please ask candidates, please keep your answers as brief as possible so we can give our audience an opportunity. Thank you. Jodie, next question, please.
Hi, if you were lucky enough to become our MP, what would you do to bring community involvement from the local communities into the building of housing locally?
Okay, so our question there, what would you do to bring community involvement into the building of houses locally? Michael, would you like to start, please?
Well, they need to be consulted, really. I think that's the main thing. The type of housing also is also massively relevant. I think all too often, property developers are quick to build on greenbelt sites because it's cheaper for them, when there are plenty of brownfield sites that are available and usable. So I think we need to look at what sort of properties are actually going to solve the housing crisis. You know, detached housing and semi-detached housing are great, and they're great for families to be brought up in. But there's also a lot of young people who might like to stay and live in this constituency, and say flats with balconies are a really good alternative to that.
Okay, thank you. David?
Yes, so I have a situation. You've got land trusts, which I think the lady's referring to in regards to the communities that build their own properties, etc. And these are things that we can take into it. But I've got a policy in regards to housing. Until we get the GP surgeries, the NHS waiting list down, and all of these big things that we're sorting out, public transport, etc., we should not be building any housing, in my opinion, other than social housing. We really need to take these big questions to task and say, look, we really need to deliver affordable homes. Affordable homes are not affordable homes at £700,000 with a discount. They need to be visionary and creative, and the lady's touched on it. Land trusts and people coming in the communities should be one thing.
Thank you. I would like to give you an opportunity, the panel, please. Yeah, thank you.
Really quickly,
Yeah,
I agree with the point about infrastructure first, but I just want to make the point. I spent 14 years of my career working as somebody who worked with communities and developers to make sure we did effective consultation that is not just a tick box exercise, but does actually deliver genuine impact on the scheme that comes forward. So the few things that I would say say at the moment, and we'll try to be quick, just having a one-day exhibition that people attend to make their views is not a suitable way forward. It needs to be multi-platform so that so residents can participate in a manner that suits them. It needs to have feedback loops built in, and most importantly, it needs to have honesty and transparency.
Right,
when
thank you.
ideas cannot be taken
Thank
forward.
you, Pav. Sorry, we do need to move on. Jack and then Julian, thank you.
Yeah, so I think people are overwhelmingly fair-minded. When I speak to them, they accept we need more housing, but people's concern, I think, locally are about green space, they're about protecting our heritage, and about infrastructure in advance of development. And what I would do is empower neighbourhood plans more. I think too often we have like a one-size-fits-all solution from Maidenhead at the borough. If I think about Ascot at the moment, we've got unacceptable proposals on Ascot High Street, and I think the way we get that more tangible for local people is to empower the neighbourhood plans, give them a bigger slice of the SIL money, and that is the way I would approach these things.
Jack, thank you. Julian.
Sorry, if you didn't hear that, it was the previous administration put those unacceptable plans through. But anyway, look, we're a bottom-up group of party, and I think I'll just say, yeah, absolutely. That's a good way of building houses, involve the local community. Yeah, I won't say any more.
Thank you. Right, can we get one more question, please?
Hi. Yeah, I was somewhat surprised to see on the election leaflets from some of you a ban on the ULEZ expansion, which is really bizarre because I'm not aware of any major political parties planning ULEZ expansion. I was in Bath at the weekend. I paid £14 to drive through a clean air zone. I then spent the day in a beautiful city with clean air in pedestrianised areas. On the NHS website, it points out that every year 28,000 to 36,000 people a year die because of poor air quality. Now, in London, there is a ULEZ zone which has become a sort of a target for various campaigns which really have little to do with clean air. And scientific evidence shows that you can make minimal reductions in air pollution and have massive results. So what I would like each of you to tell me is why you think we should or shouldn't have a ULEZ, or why you think it's acceptable for up to 36,000 people a year to die from poor air pollution.
Thank you.
I think that might be aimed at me.
Yeah. Okay. I'll let two of you come in on that. Questions regarding
So I
ULEZ?
have on my literature so I'm going to address that directly. So I think ULEZ is a money-making scheme. Why do I say that? Because the particulates in question are nearly 3,000 times the level of on the street in London on the Bakerloo line at peak times. So the idea that it's a clean air thing, I think, is for the birds. Why do I think it's relevant to us? If a neighbouring authority wants to build a development do its borough local plan, then they have a statutory responsibility to consult affected nearby authorities. I believe that when Labour Sadiq Khan does things that have significant detrimental economic and social impact on neighbouring authorities, we should have a statutory obligation at the borough level in order to input into those things.
Thank you. Pav?
I'll be really quick. I do not think it is acceptable, and I do think we need to be taking action to address the issue of pollution in our streets. I do support ULEZ. Obviously, for London, that is a decision for the London Mayor. But one thing I would say is actually Sadiq did consult with some of the neighbouring councils. I know because I was part of that consultation. And if I am elected as a Labour MP, I will ensure that continued consultation on any issues that have cross-boundary impact.
Thank you, Jodie. Thank you. Just very, very briefly, please, because we are running very short of time. No, Julian was speaking. Yeah.
Sorry. I think the equivalent of ULEZ is likely to be the future for big cities, I think. It's not going to happen here. It's a big city thing. But they should have had a better scrappage scheme because you can't penalise poor people. But I think it is the way to go.
Thank you. Right. Can we get one more question, please, from the audience? Have we got a brief question?
Hi, thank you. I would just like to know what each of you would like to say to us as Royal Holloway students, because we are going to be part of this constituency going forward with the boundary changes. So obviously, financially and academically, a lot of people at Royal Holloway are struggling. I know this myself and my friends have talked about this. So what will you guys do to help students in the area?
Okay, so a question there. So we've got a pupil from Royal Holloway University. What would you do to support local students in the area?
That's a really big topic you've asked for the last question. I'll try and rattle through some of them. First of all, better standards in accommodation for where you're living, and some of that does need to come, in my belief, around some HMO licensing and landlord licensing to stop unscrupulous landlords benefiting from putting students in unsafe accommodation. Secondly, I think the university needs to do much more about providing safe and secure routes, whether that's lighting, whether that's night buses, and actually making sure that there is support in place for students that need it at the time that they need it. I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Pav. Julian.
I think it's really sad. There does seem to be a bit of a town v gown thing going on in Englefield Green at the moment, which is really sad. Look, Royal Holloway's expanded and it's expanding more, and we need proper housing. We need proper housing for either on the Royal Holloway grounds itself or locally.
Right, thank you. I am going to move on to closing statements now because we are literally at our time. So we will go in reverse order this time, and we will then start with Julian. Thank you.
So on 4th of July, you'll be electing a person and a party. And if you like, it's a package deal. That's the way our electoral system works, sadly, but there you go. And so the choice really is, do you want a party that is about inclusion? Because the Liberal Democrats have always been about inclusion, and I've always been about inclusion. Or do you want the sort of politics of blame and division? Do you want a pragmatist? I've always been a pragmatist, and as a party, we have always been very pragmatic. We've listened, what works? That's something I always hear at conference, what works? That's how we're going to do things. Or do you want dogmatic, whether it's left, right, or whatever it is? Do you want someone who is going to collaborate? Do you want someone who is going to collaborate and a party that is all about inclusion, collaboration? Or do you want sort of antagonism? Do you want the politics of blame, culture wars, class wars, if you like? And ultimately, do you want a local champion? Because I think that's what I offer here. Most of you, I know a lot of people. I promise we only got didn't even take our allocation of 10, but I know a lot of people in this audience. And the reason is because I'm embedded in this local community, and I have been for years. And I'm really the only one of the candidates who can say this. And I'm really enjoying seeing the new parts, the half of Langley, the Virginia Water, Englefield Green as well. And I will be that local champion. Liberal Democrats are always the local champion. Liberal Democrat MPs always work hard. They work hard for you. That's what I will be if you elect me as your MP on the 4th of July. Thank you.
So next up is Jack. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I've enjoyed this evening, even if I took a few rotten apples. I understand people's frustrations with the Conservatives, and I've tried to be honest here today about where I share those frustrations and how I see things both locally and nationally. I am asking you to trust me with your vote, so from me you won't get something from Conservative Central Office. My principles are of the centre-right, and I am proud to be the Conservative and Unionist candidate, but I owe you my independence. We've heard a lot from the other parties about how some of the problems with public services are funding, and that obviously is absolutely true. But I think any considered view of the public finances has to take into account the series of COVID, of Ukraine, over the past years. And I think it's very dangerous to believe some of the things we're seeing, particularly from the Labour Party, in terms of a blank cheque where we don't know what it's for and how it will be spent. If you do me the honour of trusting me to be with your valuable vote, my commitments to you are very simple. I will be an active, local, vocal constituency MP first and foremost. I will be accessible and available in each and every town and village of this constituency. I will have an office in the town centre. I will have surgeries rotating through those villages. And I look forward very much to working with you all. Thank you very much.
Next up is Pav.
Thank you all. I've also had a really good evening, so I hope you've enjoyed it a little bit as well. Now, the choice at this election is clear. On the 4th of July, we can continue the chaos with the Conservatives, or we can turn the page and deliver change and rebuild our country with Labour. That choice is equally clear here in Windsor. Now, we do not let the Tories gaslight you over the last few years. The lies, the corruption, the chaos, the 42-day premiership of Liz Truss, and importantly, the untold damage that they have done to our country's reputation on the international stage. Now, Jack, I feel sorry for him in some ways. He's tried to distance himself from his national party. You would have had literature coming through your doors where he's recognised that the Conservative Party has failed you nationally and failed you locally. But he's still asking you to vote for that party. Now, I know that there are many of you in this room and in this constituency who say that they do not want to see a Tory MP returned here. So let me be clear. It is either myself or it is Jack who is going to be your MP. The Liberal Democrats do not stand a chance here. And you do not need to take my word for it. Every single independent polling website and every single tactical voting website says the same thing. A vote for the Lib Dems here is a vote to let the Tories back in. Now, as I was saying, the Labour Party is the challenger party here. Now, I am fighting for each and every vote, and if I am honoured enough to be elected to be your MP, I will be an MP that serves the needs of all constituents. If elected, there will undoubtedly be issues that we will disagree with, but you will never doubt my sincerity, my passion, my commitment, and my dedication to the people of Windsor. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just please be respectful of the candidates in their closing statements? Michael.
Well, thank you so much. The underdog again, so I really appreciate that. So, okay, thank you everyone. Thank you for the Old Court and the Windsor Eaton Brewery for tonight. Thanks Jamie and Jodie, plus all the political party candidates. As we close tonight, I want to leave you with a clear message. Real change is possible, but only if we break free from party politics. Year after year, we have seen the same broken promises and self-serving agendas. It's time for something different. As an independent, I'm not tied to any party. I'm here to serve you and put your needs first. My commitment is to you, not to a political machine. This election is our chance to restore trust in Parliament and make your voice heard. Let's link the people to Parliament. Let's make history together. Vote an independent for real change. Let's remember, independents are not tied to party agendas. This means your needs and interests are prioritised every single time. No more broken promises or party lines dictating your future. Without the safety net of a party backing, independents are directly accountable to you, the voters. This fosters greater transparency and honesty, ensuring actions and decisions that truly reflect your needs. Independents bring new ideas and solutions, free from the constraints of traditional party politics. They offer a fresh approach to the challenges we face, driving real change and progress with no excuses. Vote independent for a future where your voice matters, integrity prevails, and real change happens. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And to conclude, Michael.
Hello, and thank you for all coming, and thank you for putting on these hustings. Without these hustings, it would have been impossible for me to get any of my message out. Unfortunately, my campaign has been entirely self-funded, and as such, it's been difficult to get my message out there. A serious question to anyone in the room. Has anyone ever been polled? I am yet to find a person who said yes. The polling shows that the Labour Party seem to be the ones to beat. But the Green Party locally outperformed Labour in the May elections. So I'm not sure where that polling really is coming from. And when the Libs talk about collaboration, we all know where that ends. We need political reform. We need a fairer society. We need an MP that will hold Labour to account nationally. You've heard who I am. You've heard why I got involved in politics. And I'm in politics to do the right thing and make a difference, and to deliver real hope and real change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. So I'd like to thank our candidates for giving us their time to challenge and ask questions. I hope you're leaving this evening with a few more answers to help you make that choice come the general election on Thursday, the 4th of July. It's such an important part of our democracy that we participate in events such as these. So I'd like to thank you all for attending this evening. Lastly, please join me in thanking our team who have brought and made the event possible this evening. Martin Denny and the team here at the Old Court. Will Calvert, Windsor and Eton Brewery. Jodie Grove on audience questions. Our technical team, Alfie Horn and Zach Gallagher, outside the box. Technical team, Louis Aldon's Lock, Eventuality. Jennifer McGeechee, our producer. And finally, Simon Foy, audience management. So, thank you and good night.